We get a lot of awesome cars here in the United States, and yet it's never going to change the fact that we're always going to want what we can't have. It's the reason everyone's always considering importing something. It's the law of forbidden fruit. You want what you can't physically have. And every time I see this import discussion, it's always Honda, Toyota, BMW, Volkswagen, but it's never Mercedes. So today we're going to be going over just some of the best Mercedes that we never got here in the United States. My name is Danny Kruger. I'm the resident Mercedes nerd here at FCP Euro, and today we're going to be covering just a handful of the picks of the best Mercedes that we never got in the United States. I do have to say as a disclaimer before we get started here, in comparison to makes like VW, Audi, BMW, Mercedes is actually a lot better than others when it comes to kind of spreading the wealth. Usually when an engine that's really good is sold in Europe or somewhere else, it eventually trickles into the US market. But it doesn't mean we don't get snubbed on occasion, and we're going to be talking about all those examples today. Off the cuff here, and from the very jump, we're going to be jumping into the gas-powered vehicles and starting with the W463 chassis, also known as the G-Wagon. So the W463 G-Wagon, also the W460, which is its more military blueprint overseas, we kind of have a unique view of it here in the US. It's very much a status symbol, and you're usually going to see one in a fancy mall parking lot before you'd see it out on a trail or being used as a daily driver, mainly because of the price point. And the way that we did get it here, we got it with a lot of cool engines. Usually they're going to be pretty robust units from various V8s, the M113, the M113K, the M273, the M156, the M278, the M157, all these different blueprints of V8 and forced induction or non-forced induction. End up. You could also get one with a V12, of course, and there's a whole bunch of different ways to option the cars. But basically the starting point is the G500 back in the early 2000s with a naturally aspirated V8. That's the cheapest one you're going to find. Overseas, however, because of its military blueprint and all of these things that we kind of haven't seen the G-Wagon as here in the United States, you can get a whole host of engines that we never even had the option for here. So a great starting point to discuss this is in the W463 G320. This is one of my favorites, and that's why we're starting here. Selfishly, I love the M104 engine. It's an inline six built by Mercedes. It had a couple of different displacements available, but in this G-Wagon, in the G320, it's a 3.2 liter. And honestly, if you're not familiar with Mercedes entirely, the M104 engine is best compared to like a BMW M50, S50, M52, S52, the E36 inline six. It's dual overhead cam, it sounds very similar, revs very similar, makes very similar power. The reason I'm clinging to this one specifically is these cars are a perfect time capsule of the period that they were sold in Europe. This buttery smooth inline six is awesome for daily driving if you just want to blast down the highway, hum along at the speed limit, and just enjoy your drive in a comfortable, boxy SUV. But also the driveline underneath, it's typical G-Wagon. It's super robust. And my favorite part of these, besides the sound of that glorious little M104 and the fact that you can live with it pretty easily with just normal pump gas and standard daily driving, is the interior. The G320, some of these interior options drive me nuts. It's like tartan interiors, there's all different kinds of crazy leather. Basically everything you want in your G-body Porsche you could have in the G320. All of the craziest interior options. From the exterior, because it is the G-Wagon, basically, if you were to import one of these, nobody would know the difference between the modern G-Wagon and the 90s one with an M104 in it. So the M104, unbelievable and a great pairing for the G chassis. However, there is one that has become a little more famous recently that's also one that we didn't get and is arguably a lot cooler. And this is going to be the G500 Cabrio. So, I mean, the G-Wagon, very versatile in its blueprint. We already discussed that we did get the G500 here with its M113 V8. But to get one in a coupe with a drop top in an off-road capable SUV with military blueprint, I don't really know of another vehicle. I guess maybe a Hummer H1, and even that, it just pales in comparison to the luxury of the G500 Cabrio. These kind of came on the map when Doug DeMuro imported one. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that car, and honestly, it's one of the quirkiest cars that are out there. It's perfectly on brand for him, and it's still one of my favorites just because of how obscure and strange it is. Now, picking it up with our next gas-powered Mercedes on the list that I just wish landed in the States is something that you definitely couldn't live in, but you might want to. This is the R171 SLK55 AMG Black Series. So the R171 SLK55 that we did get in the United States was an awesome car. It's got the M113 V8, it's got got a 7-speed automatic transmission, big bulky fender flares, huge brakes, awesome car. It was one of the best convertibles Mercedes ever sold in the United States. But when it comes to the Black Series model that we didn't get here, the car gets a whole different kind of potent. A whole bunch of things on the normal SLK 55 are now replaced with carbon fiber, including that folding top roof. The SLK 55 Black Series is actually now a coupe with a fully carbon fiber roof going all the way back. It also got carbon fender flares. A whole bunch of the interior is swapped over to carbon. They shed a ton of weight out of this thing. They also added more power. They added a limited slip differential, bigger wheels and tires. It's effectively the R171 in its ultimate form, as pretty much every Black Series Mercedes is. On top of what I just said, besides all of the carbon fiber, you get carbon ceramic brakes. You get height and damping adjustable suspension. You get those crazy alloys and fat tires. I mean, it's really the too long didn't read version of this entire car is it's effectively taking an R171 SLK, turning it into a coupe and making it as volatile as possible in such a small little chassis. It's one of the best cars we never got from Mercedes. Now, sticking in the vein of some of the craziest Mercedes ever made, but moving on from the SLK Black Series comes the W209 chassis CLK. Now, there was a Black Series version of these, and we actually did get those in the US, but even before those came an even crazier W209 in the CLK DTM edition. This car was honestly pretty crazy, and while its styling may leave some things to be desired depending on your personal taste, it's honestly one of the craziest Mercedes ever made because lots of the production of this car was entirely outsourced to HWA. Who is HWA? Well, at the time they were handling pretty much all of Mercedes' official DTM competition efforts. So when they call this a CLK DTM edition, it is not just a marketing ploy, it is quite literally a DTM edition. And a lot of the part numbers on the CLK DTM do have HWA specific or targeted part numbers. Now, under the hood, the CLK DTM gets pretty special. So there's an M113K under there, the supercharged V8 they put in pretty much everything else, though it actually never came in the W209 CLK aside from the CLK DTM. Did get a naturally aspirated V8, but the only way to get the supercharged one was to get the CLK DTM edition. On top of that, in the hands of HWA, it got reworked cams, the supercharger was changed around a little bit, forged internals, and because of this, you would have 600 horsepower near enough on tap. So behind that crazy M113K, we also had a speed shift version of the 722.6 5-speed auto, just as bulletproof, but shifts a little bit faster. Moving back, we had a limited slip differential. We had giant upsized brakes. We had fully height and damping adjustable coilovers on these cars from the factory with fully machined billet aluminum camber plates in the front. The only time we've ever seen that from Mercedes on the W203 or W209 blueprint, which of course are shared. And then moving into the interior, still ignoring the wide body and the aero, of course, we have basically a race-focused interior for what really is a street car. It has bucket seats, it's got carbon and Alcantara everywhere. It's got a 6-point racing harness, which is a large reason why it was never sold in the United States and why we couldn't have it. It's quite literally a DTM company's take on a street car as done by HWA alongside Mercedes. It's crazy. There were only 180 of them ever made and sold worldwide, 100 coupes, 80 cabrios. I've never seen one on US soil. I hope to someday. If you have seen one, let us know so I can go and hunt it down because I'd love to just look at one of these cars. But CLK DTM, it's hard to find a better one that we didn't get than that. Moving on from our crazy Black Series and AMGs and HWA tinkered cars, we have something a little bit more pedestrian that we just plain old didn't get. This is going to be the C43 AMG Estate Twins. So let's break down these C43s a little bit further. So the earlier version is going to be the W202 C43 AMG. So we did get those in the United States. They were a sedan. They were awesome. They had the M113 V8, 5-speed auto. It was a great little sedan that at the time, the late 90s, early 2000s, put up absurd numbers. And it was one of the first times that people started to kind of recognize the value of an AMG tinkered sedan, which the tried and true recipe, giant motor, small car, the classic AMG recipe. And the C43 AMG, it sold really well here and it's still very desirable. But the key here is overseas, they got a wagon version and we never got that here. So that's one thing that, I mean, it would have been great to have. I haven't seen one on US soil yet. If someone has imported one, they're much smarter than I am because that's going to be worth a lot of money someday. But then even moving further down the line and jumping forward a few decades, you got to keep in mind that Mercedes brought back the C43 nomenclature in the United States for the W205 chassis. That one got a twin-turbo V6. And overseas, they got a wagon again, and we didn't get that here. So basically, we got snubbed on the C43 twice if you like a fast wagon, whether that's the V8 powered W202, which is timeless in wagon trim. I mean, it is even better looking than the sedan. Or in the 205 realm, I would love to have a twin-turbo V6 station wagon that can do 0 to 60 in like the 4 to 5 second range. But alas, we're going to have to wait a little while for either of those to land on US soil, although we are getting pretty close to the 202 being legal to import. So last up, when it comes to some of the best gas-powered Mercedes that we kind of got snubbed on, comes the MFA trio. So what is MFA? MFA in Mercedes talk is modular front architecture. It's very similar, if you're familiar with like Volkswagen or Audi, to the MQB platform. And basically the idea is you have an engine, a driveline combo that you can kind of interchangeably swap with different body models and trim levels so that you can basically, as a manufacturer, sell the same package and engineering in multiple formats. Now, Mercedes has done this a few times. There's an MFA or MFA1 platform and the MFA2 platform, but we're looking specifically at the MFA, the original platform here. Now, cars that were built on that here in the States include the CLA, the GLA, and then overseas they got the A-Class. There's also the B-Class, which we didn't get here. But moving on to MFA2, they added a couple more. You'll see the GLB, things like that. But focusing on the MFA originally, we never got the A45, which is honestly, in my opinion, a huge one. It's basically very similar to like a GLA or CLA 45, of course, it's the same driveline, but rather than being a small sedan or a small SUV, it was a hatchback. So basically the hottest of hot hatches. At the time, the M133 engine that was sold in this car was the most powerful production four-cylinder ever made, and I would love to have that in a tiny short wheelbase hatchback, but we never got it here. And taking that even further, we did get the CLA 45. I mean, you may recall we stole the motor from one and put it in this right here. But what we didn't get was a CLA 45 Estate. And overseas, you could have an all-wheel drive, turbocharged four-cylinder, massive horsepower, massive torque, dual clutch wagon with a short wheelbase with the CLA 45 Estate. I don't really know how that didn't land here. I think it's just the general American distaste for wagons, unfortunately, but it's one of the coolest cars, in my opinion, that they've made over the past couple of decades. It is the most potent little small displacement wagon I can remember seeing, and alas, we will not see one on US soil for a long, long time. All right, so now we're going to change gears a little bit, or change fuel types anyways. If you know me at this point, whether it's personally or just through some of these videos, you'll know that I have a massive affinity for Mercedes and their diesels. So we're going to be picking it up with some of the craziest diesels that we didn't get here, and that's really important for Mercedes specifically. Now, if you're not familiar with some of the Mercedes diesels out there, the ones that we did get in the States are some of the craziest pieces of diesel engine engineering ever created. Mercedes knows how to do a diesel unlike anyone else. They make massive power. They'll do it for hundreds of thousands of miles, and they also rev really high, which is super non-diesel of them. But the one that we're going to start with here is going right back to the W463 chassis in the G-Wagon. If you were to grab yourself a G300 TD in the late 90s, you got yourself all of the benefits that we were talking about earlier on. The great, very 90s interior, that bulletproof off-road focused driveline with military-grade engineering. But you also got the OM606 under the hood. And the OM606, as people are commonly referring to as the Diesel 2JZ these days, has basically infinite tuning potential. You can do relatively light bolt-ons and make 300-400 horsepower and a whole lot more torque, or you could build the motor, and if you want, you can make 800 horsepower and well over 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. It's whatever you want to do. Now, in my mind, I can't really think of something better if I'm just looking to maybe crawl some trails or ramble around off-road, just to put along in a stock OM606 G-Wagon, because I can trust that it'll function for years to come, will never break down on me, and will just kind of idle its way up hills with massive amounts of torque. Alternatively, I could also see the benefit to doing the big turbo, the big injection pump, and having something that can rip off-road trails with 600 foot-pounds of torque and sling dirt all over the place. It would be awesome. I'd love to have it, but we didn't get it here. So moving on from big boxy SUVs back into reasonable sized sedans, coupes, and even wagons, it's going to be another one near and dear to my heart, if you know me, the W203 chassis. I have historically hoarded these. I am very much guilty of it. I will own that. But my heart with the W203 chassis lies overseas. It's going to be the C30 AMG, and then it's a slightly more pedestrian brother, the C320 CDI. So let's divide these again. So the C30 AMG is best imagined, if you know Mercedes well, at least on US soil, as a C32 AMG. So it got the same brakes, the same body package, the same wheels, pretty much looks exactly the same. Now the difference is underneath the hood. The C32 AMG, as we got it here, you could only get in a sedan and had a supercharged V6. That was the M112K. But in the C30, you got the OM612, which is a 5-cylinder turbo diesel. And it's also stolen by Mercedes from a work van. So the OM612, even overseas, was an engine for the Sprinter. And for whatever reason, the maniacs within AMG, as the official only AMG branded diesel, chose to rip that 5-cylinder out of the Sprinter van, plop it down into the W203 chassis. After they did a bunch of fun things to it, including add an air-to-water intercooler, added displacement by boring it out, beefing things up, they added a much bigger turbocharger, and basically what we were left with was a relatively pedestrian sedan, at least in appearance, besides big brakes and wheels and tires. But it also was a 3-liter turbocharged 5-cylinder diesel that made colossal horsepower and torque in stock trim. And it was hooked up to the same bulletproof 722.6 5-speed that we keep talking about with a massive torque limit. So basically what you have is a car that's capable of really good freeway economy, but it sounds phenomenal because it's a 5-cylinder, and infinite tuning potential because it's a Mercedes diesel. They'll last forever, they look great, and personally, if I was to pick any of them up, I would grab the wagon with this turbo 5-cylinder in it because I don't really know where else you could get that aside from maybe a Volvo, and I personally prefer the rear-wheel drive. The other benefit of these is, for whatever reason, in the countries that they were sold in overseas, they're massively underappreciated. So to get one onto US soil right now, although they're not quite legal to import, is pretty much doable for a nice one under 15 grand. I kind of just blew up my own spot, so don't beat me to it. I want to be first, but keep it on your radar. It's a good one. So last on our list of forbidden diesels for the US market from Mercedes comes, in my opinion, the holy grail of all of the Mercedes diesels, the final boss. And that's going to be the W211 E400 and E420 CDI. So the real party piece here with the E400 and the E420 CDI, besides the fact that they're kind of pre-clean diesel era, so they're a lot easier to live with for the most part, being in the early 2000s, is under the hood. The OM629 is a 4-liter, twin turbocharged, all aluminum, dual overhead cam, variable valve timed V8 diesel. So, I mean, let's just back up for a second. If you're looking at gas-powered engines, the easiest thing to equate this to would be like the 4-liter that Audi's using as a twin-turbo V8 in a lot of their more modern cars. And even that is cutting edge. Mercedes has gone and done that with direct injection, the same type of fashion, with a diesel in the early 2000s in an E-Class. And on top of that, the Sport package, you do a couple little bumper swaps and things like that, and it looks just like an E55 or an E63 and looks great. But the way that they sold it, it's a pretty good sleeper out of the box. You basically wouldn't know that it was any sort of hopped up or special model. In factory trim, again, this bi-turbo V8 diesel, 32 valve, 4 cams, absolute madness, is making 315 horsepower and a good amount over 500 foot-pounds of torque. Additionally, you get the 7-speed automatic behind it rather than the 5-speed a lot of diesels came with in the US. So you get faster shifts, which means while you're traction limited, you're still going to do 0 to 60 in less than 6 seconds. It's ridiculous. And then of course, because it's a diesel, play with the fueling tables, maybe do some stuff with the exhaust, and they'll make 700 foot-pounds of torque all day long. And basically where that immediately takes my mind is just blasting the Autobahn. I'm sure that's what they were designed for, and a big part of why we didn't get that, because I don't know where that car kind of settles into the niche of the US market. But for combined fuel economy on top of all of this, they average 25 miles per gallon between both city and highway. It's a comfortable E-Class with an absolute earth-shattering engine underneath the hood, and you wouldn't know the difference even if you saw one right in front of you, whether you're on US soil or even potentially in Europe. It's one of the craziest diesels ever sold worldwide, And then add in the fact that it's a classic Mercedes diesel, so it's got a dual row timing system and everything else, and they'll just run indefinitely. It's the coolest motor, in my opinion, Mercedes has ever made. So that is going to conclude today's list of some of the best Benzes that we never got in the United States. Of course, if I missed any, feel free to drop them down in the comments below and let me know which ones I forgot. Or additionally, you can think of other imports that I should have on my radar. Definitely drop those below too, because I gave you all my import secrets. Now I want some of yours so I can keep them on my horizon too. But if you like this video, leave us a like. And of course, if you like the information just like this, subscribe for more because we have a whole lot more coming your way very soon. We'll catch you in the next one.